How's it going, everybody? You are listening to episode number 51 of Trail Tales. My name is Kyle O'Grady. I am a thru-hiker, I am a peak bagger, and this is the podcast where every single week I have on another thru-hiker and another peak bagger and another hiking nerd like myself to talk about their experiences on the trail. And that's exactly what happens in this episode. My good friend Taylor Norton comes on the show for the second time. He was first on way back during episode number 2, freaking year ago, people. It's crazy. That year went by really fast. And on this episode, we talk about his attempt at thru-hiking the Tahoe Rim Trail. Most of the episode is me just asking him those basic thru-hiker questions that someone might research when they're first learning about a potential trail to thru-hike. And then at the end, we do talk a little bit about why he wasn't able to complete his thru-hike, and we gave a little reminder that you should always put your safety before your ego when it comes to these things, folks. So it was a great episode. Taylor, when you hear this, man, thank you so much for coming on a second time. Let's do it again soon. We're going to get into the conversation in just a second, but first, I got to read a couple iTunes reviews. I'm way behind on these. This next one I'm about to read is from September 27th, 2019, so here we go. This one says, "Great podcast, Kyle. I haven't listened to them all, but I am working on it. You speak clearly, and the listener can really tell you are enjoying this." I am. Thank you very much. Thanks for the diverse interviews that all seem to inspire and educate in their own way. Keep up the great work, and good luck getting on the PCT. It's hard to stop adulting once you start. Oh boy. Also, thanks for the Trail Tales stickers. From Matt. Matt, thank you very much. I'm sorry it took me so long to read this. This next one says, ooh, this is a long one. "Bummed to be out of episodes. I've been listening to all of these episodes in succession and now have to wait for weekly ones. At first, I was a little bit unsure of the content. There are a lot of F-bombs, but not a lot of helpful content. Ouch. But I continued listening because everyone has to start somewhere and learning a new craft. I'm so glad that I did. I consider myself an avid hiker, even though I've not completed a thru-hike. I've learned a lot about a variety of trails, picked up a hiking tip or two, and was inspired to start hiking the New Hampshire 48. Boom, I love that shit. I bagged 6 peaks during the 46 Climbs event, which I learned about via Trail Tales. Awesome. I even joined the team in fundraising. Much appreciated. I like Kyle's format, as it reminds me of shooting the breeze with other hikers at a campsite." That one started out pretty negative and turned very positive very fast. Thank you so much for that 5-star review. Make me get even more behind on these people. You know that's a great way to help the show, so please do that. We're going to get into it here real quick. I got to give a shout out to my 2 latest Patreon supporters. Shout out to Kristen and shout out to Travis. If you're interested in really stepping up your game in helping out the show, please go to patreon.com/trailtales. I've had a number of people join over the last couple weeks, which has been really cool. It's honestly pretty encouraging. So go check that out if you're interested. You'll get some bonus content and some other goodies. Instagram @TrailTalesPod as usual. Facebook Trail Tales, just search that. And guess what? YouTube is a thing, kind of. It's not really a Trail Tales specific YouTube, but I've decided I'm going to start making videos. I know. The last thing the world needs is another douchebag with a YouTube channel. Trust me, I know that, but I like cameras, I like video, and I like trying to teach people about the AT and thru-hiking and all this stuff, so I'm gonna do it anyway. If you type in Kyle Hates Hiking on YouTube, the channel should come up. I already posted a video about Trail Tales. I made a pretty sarcastic, pretty goofy video about my process behind creating the show. Pretty much just goes over all the steps that I take every single week to make the show, and I tried to be funny. Some of it's kind of funny, some of it's just cringy, but either way, you should go check it out. I will have a link to that in the show notes, and again, just type in Kyle Hates Hiking on YouTube, and it should come up. And yeah, go smash the shit out of that subscribe button. With that said, let's get into it. This intro is going long. With my friend Taylor Norton, episode number 51, Long Trail class of 2018 and almost Tahoe Rim Trail class of 2019. Sorry, Taylor. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode number 51 of Trail Tales. Taylor Norton is on the show. What's going on, Taylor?
How's it going? It's good to be back.
Dude, it is good to have you back, let me tell you. So for those of you that might be new, or honestly even those of you that have listened to every episode, you might remember Taylor. His last episode was the second episode ever that I put out, like freaking so long ago now. And in fact, it'll actually be 1 year. I like just realized this right before I hit record. It'll be 1 year to the date between when this episode comes out and when our first episode came out. It was number 2. We talked about the Vermont Long Trail. Taylor and I met each other when I was on my Appalachian Trail through hike in 2018. And yeah, dude, thank you so much for coming back on. Like it's so crazy that like 1 year later exact, it's like come full circle pretty much.
Oh no, my pleasure, man. No problem.
We're also both kind of hungover today, so hopefully my voice doesn't sound too scratchy right now, but not feeling super great. I do have coffee and water, so I think we can kind of get through it though. I don't know
push it through.
How are you feeling, Taylor? What are your remedies?
Oh, just water. Stay hydrated. It's the classic remedy.
Yeah, that's all you need, I guess. But actually, no, I definitely need the coffee.
Yeah.
But
I would be drinking coffee. I recently quit. Got off the caffeine.
Oh man, that's tough. That's tough. Why did you do that?
Just trying something different. Just seeing if I could be dependent on, stop being dependent on something every morning.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been good so far. It was a bit of a exercise and restraint at first for sure, but now I never think about it. So
how long now? I'm just curious because I drink, like, I'm a super avid coffee drinker.
I know. I was too. Yeah. Probably 3-4 months now.
Oh wow! Oh, so, dude, you're killing it then.
Oh yeah, no, we're good.
Yeah, you're killing it. I thought it might have been like just like a week or two, or like a couple days, but no. Oh, you're set, man. That's crazy. I don't know. I love the taste of coffee too. So it's not like just the caffeine. That being said, I had the option of just making decaf this morning or having to drive to get regular, and I did choose to go drive. So maybe I'm just fooling myself here, but who knows? Taylor so taking a step back, why don't you just kind of explain to everybody, Taylor, who you are and what you've hiked and pretty much anything about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Kyle said, we met while I was hiking the Long Trail last year, and I kind of joined in on a group of AT hikers for the section where the AT overlaps with the Long Trail. Had a blast hiking with you guys, and then we split off and I finished on my own. Since then, I moved from the East Coast to Lake Tahoe, and I've been serving as an AmeriCorps volunteer here for the past 11 months. And while I was here, I learned about the Tahoe Rim Trail, which is kind of a similar trail, a similar size class as the Long Trail. It's about 165 miles long. And that kind of immediately gained my attention. So I had kind of planned for a year to try to hike it in the following season. And we'll talk about how that went.
Yeah, we'll get into that for just a second.
Yeah.
Get into that in just a second. But so this is going to be, folks, one of those episodes where I kind of learn about a different trail, a lesser known trail. I don't know, is the Tahoe Rim Trail like pretty well known on the West Coast? Am I just like kind of blind to that living up here in freaking northern Vermont or
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's well known, but not, it tends to get overshadowed for sure by like the JMT, or the what's it called, the Pacific Northwest Trail, I think, is getting popular.
Yeah, and then the PCT too, obviously.
And the PCT obviously is the big one, but I was more thinking of trails in the similar size class.
Right. That makes sense.
The PCT is definitely the almighty trail out here.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. You were trying to do the JMT for a little while too, right?
Yeah, so that was actually one of my original plans. I put in for permits, and the permit process is pretty complicated. And I'm not even sure I did it right, but I didn't end up getting a permit, basically. So it's much more competitive than like, the Long Trail. You just get on the trail and start hiking.
Yeah, kind of a bummer, but I mean, it also kind of makes sense because there's so many people trying to do the JMT. I talked about that permit. Well, I didn't talk about it. I don't know anything about it, but I had a guest talk about it back in like episode like 36 or something in the 30s. Nick Scaramuzzo was my guest's
right
name, and so if anybody's curious about that, you can go check that out. But it is kind of a hassle, and I feel like the Tahoe Rim Trail, at least, like, I don't know. Actually, I guess I shouldn't say that. Are there any sort of permits at all you need for the Tahoe Rim Trail?
Yeah, so there is one. You do need a permit for Desolation Wilderness, but it's not a problem getting it. The one problem is trying to nail down what days you're going to end up in Desolation Wilderness. So that was something I wasn't used to. You know, hiking the long trail, it was just kind of, you know, get to wherever I want to be on whatever day, and it was totally fine. But the desolation process, you kind of have to let them know where you're going to be, what day. So you have to kind of plan for that, which was an interesting thing to work around.
So it's not like an official like park. It's just like a wilderness area.
Right. Yeah. So it's just a protected wilderness.
Okay.
It's really beautiful. It's all just like there's just a raw granite everywhere, which is why when you hike it, you can tell why it's called Desolation. And it's just heavily trafficked. I think it's one of if not the most heavily traveled wilderness areas in the country.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
How many miles of the Tahoe Rim Trail is the Desolation Wilderness, you said?
Desolation,
right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So off the top of my head, I want to say 30-ish,
Okay.
in that range. It's not super far.
But far enough that you have to kind of like plan out your campsites a little bit, yeah.
People have done it in a day. I was planning on really taking my time through there because I really enjoy it, and I brought a fishing rod along.
Oh, nice.
So I wanted to spend 2 days fishing at some lakes that I really like to go. So it was, you could do it in a day. You could do it in 2 days. I was gonna do it in 3.
What's the process for the permit like? Is it because on the AT, for instance, there's like the Shenandoahs where you literally just walk up to a kiosk, like fill out some shit, and then like you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's your permit. Or the Smokies is almost the same thing. You have to print it out ahead of time and pay like $20 or whatever, but it's still like pretty damn easy. It sounds like it was not too much of a hassle to get that permit either.
Not at all. Yeah, I mean it's you can do it online. You can reserve areas online. Okay. There's a Rim Trail hiker permit that kind of says I'm going to be in the wilderness at this day, and you can kind of camp wherever you want once you're in there.
Which would make it a lot easier. That's like the one in the Smokies. It's like normally in the Smokies you have to pick out your designated campsites and reserve it for whatever your night is and all that stuff, but they have the Thru-Hiker permit where it's just like, okay, get in and get out in X amount of days and, you'll be fine.
Right. Yeah, and so you could, like I said, you can either get it online or you can get it in person. I live 10 minutes away from the permitting office, so I just walked in and got mine the day before I was going to go out.
Okay.
Or it might have been the day of, actually, the morning of, because I don't think I started till like noon on my first day. So
I got you, man. I got you. I'm glad you brought up the fishing pole thing a second ago, because I actually completely meant to ask you about this when we were kind of talking before, and I forgot because I suck and I'm hungover.
Absolutely.
I see on your Instagram that you're doing a lot of fishing, and I was just kind of wondering, like, is that like backcountry fishing? Is that like front country? Like, I mean, this isn't a fishing show, but I do know that people like, kind of combine the whole backpacking or hiking thing with fishing. So I just kind of wanted to pick your brain about that a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah. So about a year ago, pretty much right around when I last came on the show, I started fly fishing, and that's kind of become a love of mine over the past year. I was interested in getting into fishing when I go on overnights or backpacking or whatever. So I got a Tenkara rod, which is it weighs about 3 ounces. It's pretty light, and it's essentially just a telescopic pole with a line on the end of it. There's no reel or anything like that. So that's kind of what I've been using while backpacking. And it's just especially when you're hiking alone, it gives you something to do if you get to camp early, spend a couple hours fishing. If you have the right tools to cook up a fish, all the fish in Desolation Wilderness are pretty much invasive, and they're basically trying to get rid of them lake by lake. So you don't have to feel bad about pulling a fish out of there and eating it.
Nice.
So it's a really fun. It's kind of it goes hand in hand with backpacking in my mind.
Yeah, dude, that's really cool. Yeah. I'm not a fisherman at all. I don't think I've casted a fishing rod sober in like the last 4 years at least. But it is kind of cool. And one of my friends, Dan, who I've mentioned a couple times on the show, but he doesn't have any social media. I've been trying to get him to listen to this podcast since I started it, and he still won't. I don't think he gives a shit. But anyways, he does a little bit of fishing, and a couple times when we've hiked in the Adirondacks, he's brought his pole. And I don't know, maybe he's just a bad fisherman, but most of the time he doesn't catch anything.
Yeah.
And it's also tough over there too, because half the time, like, you don't want to stop because you're just getting swarmed by freaking bugs and shit.
Right.
Especially when you're right next to the water. But one time he did catch something. I don't know anything about fish. Maybe it was like just like a brook trout or something. Like something pretty basic.
Trout.
Yeah, something pretty basic. We were on the Cranberry Lake 50 loop trail in the St. Lawrence County western part of the Adirondacks, northwestern part. And it was such a unique experience for me backpacking because, I mean, he caught the fish, but we kept it, and basically he had like a little knife to fillet it or whatever, but you know, other than that, he just had his pole, small pole, obviously trying to save weight. And he caught a couple of these fish, and we started a fire. A legal fire, folks. We always people get uptight about that stuff nowadays.
Oh yeah, definitely.
A legal fire, and then we took a stick and like Dan like sharpened the end so it was kind of like a little spear, like cut the fish down the middle, I think, and then put the fish on the spear and like hung it over the fire and like cooked it. And then we had like one of those huge Nat Geo maps, the waterproof like thing, looks like a Bible pretty much. It's huge. And we basically just took one of those and like put it on the ground, and that was just like our little plate to serve it on. And
awesome.
It was we had like fresh fish in the middle of the backcountry, so that was kind of cool.
There's nothing like it when you're just eating camp food, which, you know, I know some people are out there making some really amazing backcountry meals, but I'm not one of them. So having a fresh fish is something pretty special. Yeah, definitely. And I don't know, it kind of something you said a second ago too. It's like just kind of breaks up the routine a little bit. I mean, I've said this recently about photography, like trying to take more photos for myself. It's like you're still hiking, but it adds like a whole nother dynamic. It adds something new and interesting. And I feel like fishing would kind of be the same way. It's like you're still hiking, you're still backpacking, but you have something else that's kind of fresh and different to shake up the experience a little bit. So I think that's really cool, man. Yeah, and I found it changing up kind of my planning when I was hiking, because I would, you know, if there was a lake that I was camping at one night, I really wanted to get there on the early side, so I had some time to fish before dinner and setting up camp and going to bed. Whereas on the long trail, I was kind of just feeling motivated to hike until either I couldn't anymore or until it got dark.
Yeah, man. Did you? So you were gonna bring your pole the whole time? Like, can you fish like pretty consistently along the Tahoe Rim Trail, or are there just like a couple spots?
So the West Shore and kind of southern.
I guess it's like a lake, so
it's a loop, yeah. But you're pretty far removed from Lake Tahoe itself. But the West Shore and the southern section have some fishing for sure. And then as you move into the northern section and the eastern section, from what I understand, spoiler alerts, it's very dry and there's not as much opportunity.
Okay, interesting. So. But did you catch anything? That's the real question.
Oh yeah, I mean, my first campsite, I caught like 3 or 4 brook trout in this high altitude lake. It's like 9,000 feet around there. It was a lot of fun. The second lake I camped at, no fish at all, and those were kind of the 2 areas I was hoping to find fish. So it's you know, for 3 ounces, it's, even if you don't catch anything, it's a lot of entertainment for not that much weight.
Yeah, dude, definitely. Like, is that really all it weighs, is 3 ounces?
Yeah, I think with the case, it totals out to 9 ounces, which is kind of funny that the case they gave me weighs more than the rod itself. I brought along the case too, so if you want to add that in to the mix, that's, you know, it's worth it in my mind. And then, like, what else? See, I literally don't know anything about fishing. Like, what else do you need? Like, you got to have like a hook. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't even know. Like, yeah, no.
Is it really that like a small of a weight penalty?
I brought some flies, so they're like little artificial flies. You know. It's a small metal hook that's like maybe the size of your fingernail or smaller, and it's got feathers and hair tied to it. So I didn't bother wondering what the weight of that was because it's pretty negligible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I brought probably like 10 or 15 flies with me just to have some variety.
Yeah, dude, I gotcha. So here's a
Yeah.
question. So this trail is partially in California and partially in Nevada, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So if you're bringing a fishing pole on this hike, are you going to need two different state fishing licenses?
So that's actually a really interesting question. Tahoe is kind of unique in the sense that anything that kind of flows into Tahoe or is in the Tahoe Basin, you can have a Nevada license or a California license and fish legally.
Interesting.
Anywhere in the basin. So it's kind of a weird, unique exception to a lot of the rules, just because I think it would be a lot messier for everyone, authorities and fishermen or anglers alike.
When it's the same body of
if you had to have two different licenses, and there'd just be a lot of gray area.
Yeah, dude, that's interesting. I'm kind of like a geography nerd, and like borders kind of fascinate me. So like I know it's just like a state border, not quite the same thing as like international, but that is kind of interesting how there's just like that little exception, and like it makes me wonder like where they draw the line. Like is it just like within the immediate like area of the lake, or I just kind of wonder how that.
The border just kind of goes right through the middle of the lake. It's a little more like California definitely has more of the lake than Nevada. But it's just kind of I don't know, it's an interesting entity, Tahoe in itself. It's kind of a little bit of Nevada, a little bit of California, and a little bit of its own thing.
Mm-hmm. I got you, man. That sounds really cool. Maybe when I get a little bit older and am not inclined to hike as hard as I sometimes do now, or maybe if I just get sick of taking photos, I'll have to get a fishing rod. Because especially like again living over here. In the whites, I mean, I'm sure there's some spots you could fish, but I feel like in the Adirondacks, it would be a lot better. And I mean, obviously, like a ton of people do fish there, both front country and back country. So
absolutely, yeah.
That's really cool. So for these episodes, the learn about whatever trail episodes, I usually have like a bunch of questions written down. I don't think I said this I said it to you before we started recording, Taylor, but I don't think I didn't mention it in the beginning. Mentioned it in the beginning. Can't even talk. Jesus Christ. So I usually have a bunch of questions written down for these, but I was thinking about it and I was like, I always just end up asking the same questions about these trails. Like it's always just like, resupply and water, campsites, all the typical like through hiking stuff. So I'm going to do my best to kind of cover all of those things, all the things that somebody would Google initially about a trail when they're first trying to learn about it. So I guess, we covered the permit thing. It sounds like pretty straightforward there. You just need that one permit. Is there any other like big logistical information that someone needs to know like before they actually start the trail?
I mean, I would say the one thing that I had to think about that I wasn't used to, being on the East Coast, was, big water carries. There is one big water carry on the east shore of the lake. And it's not super big. I want to say, there's like 20 miles or something.
That's pretty big for my standards. So
no, it's big enough that you have to worry about it.
Definitely.
And obviously that's dependent on what time of the year you hike. Later this season, the worse it gets and the less reliable the water sources get. But I mean, I would say that was the biggest, change for me, was really having to think more about water. Whereas, on the long trail, I think there was only really one spot where I ended up running out of water and still wanted water. And that was up by like Camel's Hump, between Camel's Hump and Mansfield.
Yeah, dude. See, that's like I never have to think about the water, so that's
now it's everywhere.
I was gonna kind of ask about that later on because that's another question I always like to ask when I'm learning about these trails. So why don't I have you just elaborate a little bit more? So there's that one dry stretch. But I'm sure there's less water still than like the long trail, for instance. So why don't you just talk about like overall, generally, when it comes to this trail, what's the water situation like? How long are you typically carrying for? And can you just kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I would say what felt typical to me is there is water probably every 2 miles in the more, the more watery areas. So it's not too bad. But then there's areas where you might not have water for 5 to 10, and then there's that area on the east shore where you have 20.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more of just I didn't really plan out where I was gonna fill up my bottle on the long trail. I just kind of did it when I needed to, and it was usually worked out. Whereas on this trail, I was definitely looking at gut hooks a lot more and trying to figure out, okay, I have 1 liter left, and I've got 3 or 4 miles to the next water source. I have to get that water, so don't just walk over the creek. And there's a little bit of concern the time of year that I hiked it, which was September, that some of those water sources aren't very reliable. So it was kind of,
okay.
There's a lot of times when it was up in the air whether there'd actually be water or not.
That makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned just a second ago that there's a gut hook app for the trail. So that's one thing I was going to ask about, was just like the guidebook or maps, navigation, and all that stuff. Is gut hook kind of like the go-to these days for this trail?
So I think it's actually the Tahoe Rim Trail Association has their own app for the Rim Trail now, and I think that's the most up-to-date thing. I bought the gut hook app, or the gut hook map, last fall before I had really done much research, so I went with that. But it doesn't seem like it's been updated in a year. The elevation profiles are all wrong.
Oh, interesting.
So it was still useful, but it wasn't quite as detailed and accurate as the long trail one was. There weren't any comments at all from hikers this year. I was going off what people were saying last year, and last year was a much slower water year. So it was like, I was kind of trying to play mental games with like, is this information going to be accurate or not?
Yeah, dude. What about like just like a map, like a paper map, or like a guidebook, anything like that?
Yeah.
Call me old-fashioned, but dude, I don't know. I still prefer the maps and the guidebooks when I can get my hands on them.
The Tahoe Rim Trail Association has a paper map and a guidebook as well, as far as I understand.
Cool. That's cool that they have their own app. That's I wonder if more trail organizations going forward will do that, or if they already have and I'm just not aware. Like I could see the Green Mountain Club, for instance, doing an app just for the long trail. That being said, maybe they wouldn't, just because the gut hook app is already like so thorough there, and I'm sure they've coordinated there to make sure all that information is accurate. But
right,
that's interesting. How about like times of year for this trail? So you said you went in September, I think I heard. Is that like a normal time to go? Like what's the window, I guess, of time where people will typically through hike this trail?
Yeah, so actually I said September, but I really should have said like October, because I think I started right in the first week of October.
Okay.
So that's considered late for sure. In the Sierra, it's usually pretty dry until November, December, but you just never know what will happen.
Yeah.
As far as like snow or rain goes. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people hike it throughout the summer. Earlier season, you have to worry more about bugs. Later season, you have to be more prepared for the cold. So it's kind of just when any time in the summer season when you think you got time and you're prepared for whatever conditions get thrown at you.
Yeah, for sure. Is there like a standard? So it's a loop trail.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So like, is there a standard direction that people hike it? Like
yes.
Clockwise,
so
counterclockwise?
That was one of the more other logistically interesting things. Whereas the long trail, it's kind of like you can start at one end and go one way. You can start at the other end and go the other way. The rim trail, you can really start anywhere and finish anywhere. So it seemed like most people would start at Kingsbury Grade near South Lake Tahoe. Hike, however many days it took them to get to Tahoe City, which is in kind of the northwest corner, while Kingsbury Grade is in the northeast corner or southeast corner.
Mm-hmm.
That's the trail goes right by a grocery store at that point, and then ducks back into the woods. So that's kind of the main resupply, and then you finish up back where you started. So I decided to go with that route myself, but people have done it a number of different ways. There's definitely no written rules, and I decided to go clockwise, and it seems like a lot of people do tend to go clockwise. I'm not sure why that's the case, but that's what I decided to do.
I got you, man. I got you. Yeah, I'm looking at it on Google Maps right now, which I probably should have done right from the start, but damn, that's cool. So resupply, you kind of mentioned it a second ago there too. So that's always a huge thing I wonder about when I'm researching trails like this. So you mentioned there was a grocery store on the trail, and it's not like so. I mean, I feel like you could get away with just one resupply based on the length of this trail. Are there any other options as well? Because in like a perfect world, I feel like a trail this length, 2 resupplies would be nice and comfortable. So is there anywhere else along the way to resupply?
Nowhere that's super convenient. I mean, you can always get off the trail and, hitch a ride to a town, and it's probably never more than, 20, 30 minutes away from something. But it's just so convenient to just pull off in Tahoe City, get your food, and just keep hiking.
Mm-hmm.
Starting my first day with a 5-day food carry was definitely a wake up call in my fitness.
Yeah, dude.
And I mean, when I did the long trail, like I did mostly 3-day food carries, and the 4-day ones were like, oh, my pack is so heavy. So to have 5 days of food in there was like 5.5 really, was interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think most people just do one resupply because of the convenience factor.
Yeah, and at least you don't have to worry about mail drops either, because it's a grocery store. I'm sure it's a little pricey because it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but
yeah,
that's not exactly unusual for trail towns like this.
Yeah, well, the trail goes right through Tahoe City, which is one of the more populated areas of Tahoe. So it's kind of it's just kind of your typical grocery store. So it's nice.
Okay, actually, I'm looking at it right now. Is it a Save Mart? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. There's also a Red Box there too. You could rent a movie at the same time.
If you wanted to,
you could charge your
take
Tesla
a zero and watch a movie. Yep.
Damn.
A lot of Tesla chargers out here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is really cool that this is a loop hike, because there's not that many through hikes that are this length that are loops, right?
Right.
And so, because I found like there's been like some short through hikes even just around here that I want to do, but they're not loop hikes. And like for instance, earlier this summer, or I guess it was beginning of fall, I was very close to going and hiking this trail in New Hampshire called the Monadnock to Sunny Peak Greenway Trail. Like I literally bought the map. I already took the time off from work and everything, and like just a couple days before I left, I was gonna go do it, and I was like looking at like the prices for the shuttles and stuff because it's a point to point, and I was like, that's just not worth it. I could just go do a loop in the whites instead and like not have to pay that $100+ for the shuttle. So the fact that this is a loop hike is freaking awesome, because you still get like a full through hike. Like it's a decently long trail. Like you still get that full experience, but you don't have to worry about either shuttles or car spots, going with somebody else. You can just go and kind of do it yourself. I think that's
definitely
really
very
cool.
convenient. I mean, and the fact that the typical starting and ending point is, 15-minute drive from my house makes it pretty convenient.
Yeah, dude, no kidding. Let's see. How about, let's talk about weather a little bit. So,
yeah.
Again, and honestly, you might be a good person to talk about this with, because you understand my perspective, and now you understand the West Coast perspective too. One of like the big question marks I still have about a lot of these West Coast trails, and I've asked questions about this many times on the show, but until I actually go and experience it, I feel like I'm not really going to know for sure. Like the weather just kind of trips me up because I'm just like not used to it. It seems like it can be the weather here can be unpredictable, but I feel like it's a little bit more predictable. Maybe. I don't really know. So can you just talk about like the weather on this trail? I know you got kind of caught up with the weather, and we're going to get into that a little bit later on in the conversation. But just for now, just like generally speaking, I'm talking like temperatures, how often it rains, and is it sunny? Do you need sunblock? Like, can you just kind of talk about some of that stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. So, in general, Tahoe is extremely sunny in the summer, and extremely predictable.
Okay, interesting.
I think it rained twice over the course of the entire summer, from
wow.
late June to early September. Yeah. So in general, pretty predictable.
That sounds amazing, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, as far as temperatures go, midday, in the like midsummer midday, you're looking at, anywhere from high 70s to high 90s on a really hot day. And then because we're at elevation, At night, it will still, especially at elevation in the mountains, it can drop down into the 40s, 30s.
Oh, wow.
No problem.
So it could be like 85 during the day and then drop down to like low 40s?
Yeah, so where I live
crazy.
At lake level, midsummer it was probably getting down to the 50s. But when you're in the mountains, you have to be ready for 30 to 40 degree weather. It could freeze any night of the year.
That's insane.
So.
Damn. That's just like so. Like that would I feel like that would frustrate me because I'd be like hiking during the day, just like sweating balls, just like super uncomfortable. And then I'd still have to be carrying all that like cold weather gear too. And
yeah.
It's not like the AT where during the summer, for most of the AT anyways, you can like, you don't really, it's going to be hot during the day and it's going to be pretty warm at night too. So I find that pretty fascinating. So it sounds like it doesn't rain at all either. That's pretty sweet.
Not this summer. I mean, this is my first, year living in Tahoe, so I have one season to base it off of. But in general, I think it's pretty dry.
How high up in elevation are you getting on this trail?
Where I was, it was pretty consistently like above 7,000 and kind of riding around 8,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of, to start the trail, you drive up a mountain pass and you start at the top of that mountain pass essentially. And then you just follow topo lines almost all the way around. There's some passes, there's some up and down, but I mean, compared to the East Coast, it was like hiking in a vacation mode. I mean, it's just so flat and friendly.
So there's not that much elevation gain, elevation loss. A lot of it's pretty low key, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there is for sure elevation gain and elevation loss, but it's so gradual compared to the East Coast, where at least on the long trail, there's sections where you're just going up rebar ladders.
Yeah.
There's nothing even close to that.
Dude, I'm looking at some pictures right now on Google. It looks so cool.
Yeah.
Damn,
it's a beautiful trail.
Would you say that this would be a good trail for someone who's not experienced with like West Coast conditions to do for like their first time making it out there, I guess?
I think so. It seemed pretty straightforward to me. I'd had one hike experience before as far as like doing more than, a couple days stint. Right. And that was the long trail. And there's definitely some different logistical challenges here, but I think they're pretty easy to navigate. So yeah, I mean, Tahoe's beautiful. It's a great place to visit. And if you have time to do a hike, I think it's a great hike to come out and do. I think the JMT, from what I've heard, is a little more scenic. But I found the Rim Trail to be plenty scenic for my tastes.
Yeah, dude, I was going to ask you about that. So again, I don't understand the West Coast terrain. Sometimes you're like in a forest. Like when I was in Glacier National Park, it was like, there were some times where I would stop and look around and be like, I could literally be like in the Adirondacks right now. And then there's other times where you're just like freaking way above tree line, and I felt like I was on the moon. So can you just talk about like the diversity of the terrain or lack thereof? Like the terrain and the scenery is what I should have said there. What's that like on this trail?
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. You're getting views of the lake, every couple miles, and it's really interesting hiking around the lake because as you're going around, you're seeing the lake from different perspectives, and you're kind of getting a sense of how far you've actually walked.
And I would imagine that, can you like see almost like your path sometimes, like not like the literal path, but just like across the lake, you can see like, okay, I was up on that ridge when I was like,
or you're like, I'm supposed to be there in 3 days or whatever. So it's really cool the whole time. You're kind of looking at different parts of what you've already hiked or looking at what you're about to hike.
Yeah, I feel like that would be really cool. And maybe a little bit disheartening if you're really tired and like, shit, like I still gotta fucking do all this.
It kind of depended on my mood for sure. I was like, sometimes it's like, oh man, I've walked that far already, that's crazy. And then other times be like, oh, I still have to walk all the way over there.
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of like that on the long trail too. I know on the AT, a lot of the time, like you couldn't really see like where you came from and where you're going. Like sometimes you can, sure. But on the long trail, because the Green Mountains are pretty much just like one straight line ridge and there's not like clusters of mountains everywhere, I feel like it's a little bit, or maybe just because I live here and I know the geography so well.
It's like every summit you get on the long trail, you're like, okay, well, I'm going over that summit tomorrow. That's
exactly. It's like you can just see the line of the trail basically. So I don't know. That can be fun. It can also be a little bit disheartening if you're not in a good mood, but shit. Um, yeah, dude, this trail looks sick. Honestly, maybe I need to.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, there's like you're talking about terrain changes. It changes pretty quickly. There's sections where you're hiking and you're just looking into the Carson Valley Desert below you, like kind of Nevada desert, basin range topography. There's times when you're looking at the lake. There's times when you're just hiking on granite slabs. It's a really interesting trail.
Yeah, dude, this looks amazing. Let's see, camping. So that's another thing I always wonder about with these West Coast trails.
Yeah,
and I still don't really understand. So, how does the camping work on this trail? Are there like any it sounds like there's some established sites, at least in that wilderness area you were talking about earlier.
There's really not too many established sites. It's more just like places that people tend to go. People are going to tend to want to camp near water. So for me, it was a lot of the time looking at lakes that were a reasonable hiking distance for a day and saying, I'm going to camp at that lake today. And I mean, that tends to be out here. Everyone just kind of, when they do a backpacking trip, they're backpacking to some alpine lake somewhere and camping there. There's no shelters or anything like that. There's some areas that have designated camping areas to try to reduce impact, but in general, on the Rim Trail, I believe the regulation is you can camp there's some no camping zones, and those are delineated on the maps. But almost anywhere, as long as you're like 100 feet away from the trail and 100 or 200 feet or whatever it is from a water source. So it's pretty, you can kind of set up wherever you want.
Dude, that's really cool. Would you say that most water sources had some sort of like indication that people had been camped there before? Like, we would call them stealth sites, basically just a normal campsite that's not marked. You would say that that is like pretty common here.
Yeah, I mean, recreation is really popular here. The wilderness gets a ton of use. The forests get a ton of use. So anywhere where it seems like it's a good spot to camp, there's signs that people have camped there. Whether it be like an illegal fire pit or just some brush some pine needles or duff that's been brushed away to set up a tent. So it's pretty obvious usually.
How about other people like at the campsites? Would you find yourself camping with other hikers often? Were you camping by yourself? I know you were hiking by yourself as a solo hike, but do a lot of these campsites kind of do people like kind of group up and all camp together, kind of like they do on the Long Trail or the AT?
Not so much. That was what was a stark contrast. Whereas the Long Trail felt very social. Even the northern section, like you get to a established campsite and you talk to everyone about how their hike was that day or whatever. I barely said anything to anyone other than how's it going while you're passing on the trail.
Yeah.
It's not a social trail in the sense that the AT or the LT are.
And part of me wonders if those established sites or lack thereof influence that, because it's like when there's an obvious point to go camp that literally has a name and it is meant for people to go camp there, I feel like it's just kind of natural for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people to want to go there, especially the solo hikers. But when that doesn't exist, see, I wasn't sure if there would kind of just be like some de facto sites like that people multiple groups will still go and share, but it sounds like that's not necessarily the case. Would it be like, I know obviously it would depend on the circumstance and the people, but in general, you wouldn't really find somebody just kind of camping next to somebody they haven't met before, like they just happen to camp in the same spot?
I'm sure it happens. This just hasn't been my experience.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. How about so this is another thing, kind of goes back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago with these West Coast trails that don't have like official marked campsites. It almost like stresses me out because like I'm very much the kind of person that likes to plan where I'm going to stop by the end of the day. Now,
definitely.
Sometimes like that changes, like if it needs to change, I'll change it. I'm not like just completely dead set on it right from the beginning of the day, but for the most part, I like to have a pretty solid idea. And not knowing that there's like for sure going to be a campsite there kind of is not like supernatural for me. But it sounds like it is kind of safe to assume, at least on this trail, that water generally means a campsite?
Yeah. So, I mean, my experience, whether it be on the Rim Trail or just my own weekend excursions, anytime I've just seen a lake on a map and say, hey, that looks like a cool place to camp, I've found somewhere to set up a tent. So the terrain is friendly enough that you can usually make something work.
Yeah, and I guess if it's flatter too, you might be able to just throw your tent up in a pinch. But again, I have no experience with that, so I'm not gonna say that for sure. How about, so we talked about people a little bit there. Why don't you talk a little bit about the number of people that you've seen? So I know 160 whatever miles, like that's a lot of trails, so I'm sure there's some sections that are more popular than other sections, and the amount of people that you're seeing are going to vary. Why don't we just talk about through hikers, like for the time being? Like how many people through hike this trail? Like how popular of a through hike is it?
To be honest, I don't have a huge concept of that.
Okay.
One of my other friends was hiking it around the same time I was. We both kind of wanted to do it solo, so we started on different days.
That's kind of funny. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, we're like, hey, we're just gonna do our own thing. But other than that, I think I saw two other people that maybe looked like they were through hiking. They could have been out there for a weekend or whatever. And
I know you didn't go at like the most popular time of year either. So
no, I was in shoulder season for sure. But I don't have a huge concept of how many people hike it every year. It's not something I looked into.
How about just like day hikers? Like how were you still seeing like a lot of other people even if they weren't through hikers?
Yeah, so plenty of day hikers. And I'm sure if you went midsummer, you'd be passing hundreds of people. Just because Tahoe is it's kind of the recreation outlet for everyone living in like the Bay Area or Sacramento,
gotcha.
or the Central Valley. So a lot of people come up here on the weekends to go hiking. So in the midsummer, you'd probably see tons of people.
Cool, man. Let's see. This is why I should have had the list of questions. I feel like that covers like the very basics of the stuff I would research about a trail when I'm first learning about it.
I feel like we hit on the big points.
There's probably something else. I'll probably be listening back to this and be like, oh fuck, I forgot to ask about blah blah blah. Like that's so obvious. How did I forget that? But for the most part, I think we did a pretty good job there. Why don't we talk about what happened on your hike specifically? So I think we kind of alluded to it a few times now. Taylor did not complete this trail.
I did not.
And we're gonna why am I even gonna try to explain that? I don't even know the story. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and kind of explain what happened there?
Absolutely. So going into the hike, there was kind of one window of time that made sense for me to do it, and there wasn't. I didn't have a ton of flexibility with that. I was finishing up my AmeriCorps term, and I wanted to do it kind of roughly after that. And then once I was done, I had to hit the job search pretty hard. So about, a few days out from when I was going to start, there was some snow on the forecast, but it only looks like, maybe a half inch here or there. Nothing super serious. You'd probably still be able to see the trail. So I kept on going. Day one was great. Day two was great. But the night of day two, I kind of was looking at the weather forecast. You have service throughout a lot of the trail, which is nice.
Yeah.
I was looking at the weather forecast. It looked like it was kind of taking a turn for the worse. But I was feeling kind of discouraged. So I decided I was going to try to hike as far as I could the next day and see how the weather goes. I was just making it to Desolation Wilderness, which is where it starts to get much higher elevation and much more exposed. And the weather really started to roll in. Forecast was saying anywhere from a half inch to 6 to 8 inches of snow at elevation, and there was just way too much variability in that forecast for me to feel comfortable with the gear that I had.
Yeah.
So I kind of sat on the trail for like 20-30 minutes just kind of contemplating, because it had been something I'd been looking forward to all year. And
yeah, I was really that's not an easy decision.
No, I was really disappointed in the fact that I might be quitting. And I ultimately decided to call my roommate and have her pick me up. I didn't quite have enough cold weather gear to prepare for, 6 inches of snow.
And even if you did, that doesn't sound exactly like the most fun experience in the world.
No. And then the next day, like, I would have been hiking over an area called Dick's Pass, which is steep. Brings you up to like 9,500, I think.
Probably would have wanted like micro spikes or something like that.
Yeah, and I didn't have anything like that. So overall, it just seemed like that was the end to my hike. So I stepped off. I took a few days to kind of decide if I wanted to jump back on when the snow melted, or if I, was just going to call it for the year.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it's such a short trail. I decided I'd rather do it justice and do it all in, one proper push. So I think I'm going to give it a shot next year, but this year didn't work out. So yeah, that's the story. That's the bulk of it.
Yeah, dude. And the nice thing for you is that you live so close to this trail that you can just kind of go back like that, right?
I didn't have to buy a plane ticket,
Exactly. So like I could see if somebody had like flown out there or even just traveled a long way, taken a lot of time off or whatever. I could see them potentially like trying to make it work. Whether or not that's still the right decision is debatable, but I could see someone wanting to like kind of push through that a little bit more just to get their money's worth almost. But you live so close, it's like, why would you even like like put yourself through that? Like, I mean, I guess like want to do the trail or whatever, but like it's just so close and it's so convenient for you, and you obviously had like an easy way to just get home too. So it's like, I feel like unless you actually like winter hiking, this is really not, in your circumstance especially, there's really not that much reason to push through that.
Yeah, and I mean, it was one of the first times I've really backed down from something like that. It was tough, but I kind of had to sit there, and the thought that came into my head is like, am I being bold right now, or am I just being dumb?
Yeah, man.
And I decided with what I had, it was just not smart to keep going. So.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, especially when you have that easy of a way to get out, and that easy of access to come back out another time too. So
absolutely.
That's cool, man. Did you see? I don't want to read into this too much because at the end of the day, it is a relatively short trail, and I don't want someone out there to be like, "Oh, this is only 160 miles. Like it's not that big a deal." But I don't know. It sounds like you were a little bit frustrated, and it's never an easy decision to pull the plug on a thru hike like this. Again, it's not like you had quit your job to go thru hike the AT or anything, and now you're quitting, but it is still like a little bit of a challenge to the ego, I would say.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a hit for sure. It's not like, making it 1,000 miles into the PCT and then having to get off for an injury or, deciding that it's not for you or whatever. Yeah. It was not a huge deal at all. But it was still, when it's something that you're looking forward to for months or years or whatever, it's disappointing no matter what. Mm-hmm. So that was where the challenge came from, not in the fact that like, I can always come back and do it. It's no big deal. And, it's not hard to finish an 165-mile trail. It was just more of that, looking forward to it for a long time and then having to decide that it just wasn't the time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man, for sure. What would you do besides maybe hiking a different time of year? What do you think you would do differently this time, second time around?
What would I do differently? I really think I felt like I had everything I needed. I felt pretty dialed in. My kit felt dialed in. The only thing that really came in was the weather. So that was kind of what did it. So I think, just hiking a different time of year. It was early snow for sure. It's not unheard of to have snow then, but it is unusual.
Okay. So that's what I was going to ask you there. I was wondering if that was like not necessarily expected, but like still not surprising, I guess, or if it was just kind of like a freak snow thing.
Yeah, from what I understand, snow is always a possibility in September or October, but it's not you don't usually get consistent snow till November, December. So
gotcha, man. Now, when you go back, do you think you'll just start over and do the whole thing again, or will you? So you're not going to start off from where you left off?
No, and that was part of my decision. I was like, I could wait for the snow to melt and jump back on and try to finish it in the time that I have. But I'd kind of just rather do it justice and, take some time away from it and start it from the beginning and get that. I enjoy having that full experience of like starting and finishing a trail. So I don't think it would feel right to just jump back on another part and do like a 4-day hike.
Yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. I think and again, it's not like this was like the most difficult decision like ever to make, but I do think it's good that you were willing to put your ego aside there and, ensure that you're safe. I mean, I'm sure there's some crazy badass dude or woman out there who like could push themselves through that scenario. Honestly, I'm sure you could have still pushed yourself through that scenario.
If I had prepared for 6 inches of snow, I would have, but I prepared for like a dusting.
Yeah.
So,
but it's just not worth it. And what I'm trying to say here, people, is like, I feel like most people know this, but it's always a good little reminder. It's like, put your safety first when it comes to this stuff, especially if you live like that close to the freaking trail too. It's like, it's just not worth it, man. It's just not worth it. So that's a reason why I wanted to have you kind of come talk about this on the show, is because I feel like, and I'm guilty of this, it's like a lot of the time we just place so much emphasis on those who like complete the trail, and like there's nothing wrong with that. Like obviously you want to complete the trail, but I think it's just a nice little reminder that you can still like have a successful experience without even if you don't actually hit your goal. Like you got to put your safety first in those scenarios.
And that's a great point. I mean, the 3 days I just had a blast. It was like being on the long trail again, everything I loved about it. Other than the social interaction, that was a missing piece for sure.
Mm-hmm. Should have gone with your friend, man.
I know, I should have. But
what ended up happening to them? Did they get off too?
Oh my God, this is a story. So this is a story of what happens when you decide to push through when you're not prepared.
Okay.
Yeah. So he stuck through it. He was about 2 days ahead of me, and he had set up camp. His sleeping bag was soaking wet. His tent was soaking wet. And he was shivering, and he realized, I got to get out of here quick. This is going way worse than I thought it would.
Yeah.
So he hiked like 5 miles in like an hour and a half or something ridiculous. He was booking it to this bathroom. He works on the trails. He's part of the Tahoe Rim Trail Association.
Oh, okay.
So he booked it to the nearest pit toilet that he knew was like 5 miles away, and slept in there. and then he hiked to Tahoe City the next day and hitchhiked home.
Damn, dude.
Yeah.
See, that's I think that just proves our point here, people. It's like be careful, definitely. Sleeping in a bathroom, I love that.
Yeah, no, it was a pretty funny story, but
well, yeah, it's funny.
I was glad. Yeah,
funny
in
that it worked out.
Yeah.
Definitely, man. So yeah, we're kind of getting towards the end here, Taylor. So I did not ask you to prepare a story this time. Is there anything, like any story you want to share? Anything that comes to mind? Like if you don't have one, like not worth forcing it, but if there's anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like just a story that I like from that hike.
It doesn't even have to be from that hike. Any story. First of all, I can't even remember. I've done so many freaking episodes now. What was your story last time?
I don't remember.
1 year ago. We don't even remember.
I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea.
Some listeners like, oh, I remember it's this, and we're just like, yeah.
All right, I got a good story.
All right, let's hear it, man.
So when I was younger, it was like one of my early backpacking experiences. I did like a trip with a company called Wilderness Adventures, where it's like one of those trips where you fly out to a place and you go backpacking for like 2-3 weeks or whatever in a location. So we were hiking the Teton Crest Trail with like a group of like 10 other kids. And we were like maybe 2 days into it. And one of the kids on the trip, he goes out and goes into the woods to do his business uphill from us a little bit. And then all of a sudden we see him running back to our campsite, like pulling up his pants. Pants are like practically around his ankles.
Oh, geez.
And we're like, what's going on? And right behind him, a bull moose is just trotting behind him, chasing him. And it went from being like, this is kind of hilarious to like, wait, this could kind of go bad.
Yeah, dude.
So he like ran to the tents. We all got in our tents, and this bull moose faux charged our tents and just stood right, 3 feet away from our tents for, 10, 20 minutes, just kind of staring at us. And eventually wandered away. But in retrospect, it was just the image of this guy just running with his pants around his ankles with a massive bull moose in the Teton backcountry is burned into my mind.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Damn. Jesus Christ. I didn't know moose were that, like, aggressive.
Oh, they're aggressive, man. People think they're docile, but more people die from moose in Yellowstone National Park than bears.
Oh, no kidding.
Well, don't quote me on that stat. I think that's true.
It sounds about right. I'm pretty sure I have. Check me. I'm pretty sure I've heard something around that.
Bison too. Bison are pretty dangerous. So.
Damn, man.
Or buffalo.
Funny looking back on it, but definitely a little bit sketchy.
In the moment, it was a little scary. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Damn. That's pretty funny. It's really bugging me that I can't think of what your story was last time, so I'm gonna look it up after we're done recording here.
Maybe it was that. Honestly, I might have told.
Oh no, I would have remembered that. I definitely would have remembered that. I hope I would, anyways. Yeah, dude. 1 freaking year later. That's so crazy. Yeah. That's so crazy. I think we're gonna kind of wrap it up here, Taylor. But I gotta say, man, like. Yeah, 1 year later, like you kind of stuck with the show all that time. When we did that first episode, I hadn't even launched anything yet. We recorded that before Trail Tales had even launched.
We were just figuring it out.
Yeah, dude, that was like part of the batch of like first episodes that I put out. And yeah, dude, I just really appreciate you sticking with the show. I appreciate you being willing to come back on a year later. That's so awesome, dude. And yeah, like thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be on. It's been cool to see it grow, and you get some really amazing guests. So it's nice to be part of that group.
Yeah, man. Yeah. When you go back and you finish this trail or whatever the next trail that you do is, we'll definitely have to do another one. I think we're gonna kind of wrap it up there. Why don't you go ahead and plug anything you want to plug, social media or anything. Plug freaking I don't even know.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty active on Instagram. If you want to follow me, my social media or my handle on Instagram is at tnorts. That's TNORTSS. I post a lot of skiing content, hiking content, fishing, stuff like that. So, yeah, give me a follow. And thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, dude, no problem. Do you do any backcountry skiing?
I do, yeah.
Okay, I want to learn about that sometime. So, cool. We'll definitely...
Maybe we'll do an episode.
Yeah, dude, branch out a little bit. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thank you everybody for listening, and have a good one.